Welcome back, Brent Sobleski of Bleacher Report. He covers the NFL for them. You can follow Brent on Twitter at Brent Sobleski. Brent, first off, how are you and your family doing these days?
Oh, we're doing well. Thank you for asking. Hey, for me, life doesn't change because when you cover the NFL, it doesn't stop. And thankfully, we have something to discuss when it comes to sports and a bit of a reprieve from everything that's going on with my family. My wife's a teacher, so she's been working at home with the kids and getting everything done. So we are well, and I appreciate asking. I hope everything is on your end as well and for everyone listening.
And Brent, more respect for your wife now as I finish the show and begin my kindergarten teaching for the day. I think all of us that are doing that for home have the utmost respect. And I think all teachers, now that I've done a lot of these Zoom meetings with my daughter, my wish for teachers is to have the mute all button that they could actually use in their classroom, because it seems to be the only effective tool that an elementary school teacher has now, is that mute all button where she can get the complete attention of the classroom. But Brent, it looks as if we're leaking out some things on the schedule. I don't know if it's confirmed yet, but it certainly seems that we're going to play non-conference games first. Is that what you are hearing?
Well, that's a lot of what they want to do. And then we have to remember that what we're going to see tonight is the template, and it's not necessarily the end game when it comes to the NFL schedule, because there are going to be so many contingencies in place for whatever occurs and however the NFL can actually roll out the regular season, that what we see tonight could be drastically different once we get to whatever semblance of a regular season we got. For example, the NFL will have contingency plans in place for 16-game schedule, 12-game schedule, 10-game schedule. They'll have a contingency in place for starting in September, starting in October, maybe pushing back even later and playing into March, April. So all these things that could come out today and all these little quirks that we're going to see within the roster, within the schedule itself, could change drastically in short order depending on what happens from a national perspective. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they're going to set it up initially to try to work around certain things. And one of the best examples that I can give is when you look at the NFL, because of everything shutting down, not just from a league perspective, but from a nationwide perspective, you have two brand new stadiums that were supposed to open this year in Las Vegas and Los Angeles. And those aren't being worked on at the moment simply because those construction sites do not fall under essential business. So teams like the Chargers, Rams, and Raiders could very well be playing on the road for a month or two before they even get an opportunity to return home to the new stadiums. All these things, all these little caveats are going to be placed in this year's NFL schedule. That'll be fascinating to watch once we see the rollout tonight and where it goes from there.
Brent, there seems to be, at least publicly, a lot of concern with those that are involved in college athletics. There has been very little public concern with those that are involved in the National Football League. And maybe it's because Roger Goodell was full steam ahead on the draft and that went so well. But from the people you've been talking to in the league, privately, how much concern is there? Or do they just believe, you know what, this sucker's going to work out?
Clearly there's concern, but I would say the best word for it is determination. Determination to have the NFL back this year in whatever form or fashion they're capable of doing so and keeping it as normal as possible. The difference between the NFL and the collegiate ranks is when you have amateur athletics, quote unquote amateur, they're inherently tied to the universities themselves and how that they can apply it to not just the athletes, but the entire student populace, and they have to deal with that reality and how difficult that's going to be. The NFL, you have to worry essentially about when you get games, the 53 men that are on the field as players, the coaches, the staffs, and you don't even necessarily have to have fans in the stadium to have games to compete. So they're more likely to be able to push forward with a season than a college season simply because of the extraneous ties that come along with being an amateur sport. And that's really where the difference lies between those two. In looking at the professional ranks, there's going to be questions. We saw questions through free agency, open questions by general managers and league officials going into the draft. We saw that there was an outcry to potentially push it back. Things went well in both regards with very little hiccups along the way. So I think those two things from what we've seen so far is created a little bit of confidence and the ability to plan a season and be able to have one this year instead of pushing it off entirely into 2021.
Brent, and maybe it's just the timing of the fact that we're not in a season, we're not ready for a season to start, but the baseball players have complained vehemently, it seems, that every plan that's come out. There's been players that, well, I'm not doing that. We're not going to Arizona. The hockey players have had a little resistance, but not much. The basketball players have been pretty much all in. But football, we haven't heard much from. Is it just that the season's so far down the road, it doesn't seem like you're getting the same, whether it's pushback or positivity, it just seems that the players have more of a wait-and-see attitude. Is that accurate?
Agreed. And furthermore, I mean, we're sitting in what would normally be close to a dead period when it comes to the NFL. Yes, you would have had some rookie mini camps coming out of the draft. You would have had your first voluntary mini camps for NFL teams, and they're still holding them virtually, keeping them to the same standards as if they were able to be in the facilities. But if you're I'll just use an example because we saw it last year, Odell Beckham Jr., you are an established player, you're a veteran who's made his money, you don't need to necessarily worry about roster bonuses, you don't have to worry about what's going on with the team in the league at the moment. You just have to worry about yourself, your health, and whatever plans that you may have had to change. And so I think because of those reasons, we're seeing that it's not as big of a deal, that they can still stay home, they can still stay safe. It will become more of an issue with the NFLPA as we get closer to the actual potentiality of getting everyone within the facilities on the field and practicing. Because there's going to be a point that if we are going to have a season, it's not just going to emerge out of nowhere and guys are going to go on the field and play. There's going to have to be a preparation time of some sort, how long it's going to be, how they're going to adjust, and where all these individuals from across the country, from different areas and from different portions of our society will have to be together in a indoor facility and worry about their health beyond what the typical standard of the NFL is. And so I think that's when you'll start hearing those murmurs more. Right now, it's just they're taking it as it goes, and then they'll see as it becomes potentially more problematic.
He's Brent Sobleski, covers the NFL for Bleacher Report. Follow him on Twitter at Brent Sobleski. How concerned, if at all, are the Steelers about Roethlisberger? He's coming off a major injury. He's getting up there. I mean, this is year 17 it's going to be for Ben? Yeah. And not only that, every time you see him, quite frankly, he looks fat. I mean, he looks out of shape. I mean, is there concern in Pittsburgh about Roethlisberger?
I don't want to call out anyone else, but the quote that we had yesterday from Jay Glazer's work, it just blows my mind that it came out publicly when a fan, how every national pundit does their mailbags, right? And someone asked about Roethlisberger's, his health and the way he looks and why he goes. And Glacier wrote, "There's no fitness in Ben Roethlisberger. His idea of a great offseason workout program is doing one yoga session, playing golf, and drinking some beer." Now, first of all, that's a guy I want to hang out with. Second of all, I don't know if I want that to be my franchise quarterback, especially when you're coming off a season-ending elbow surgery on your throwing arm. And it's a legitimate concern. I mean, there's been weight potential issues with Ben dating back from college coming into the NFL. We know this. We know there were concerns about not necessarily work ethic, but attitude along the way and how he portrays himself. So when it comes to the Steelers, publicly they're saying everything the right way. They know he's his franchise, and really their actions tell us they're committed to him. They didn't go out and draft a quarterback, which surprised some people. They haven't tried to acquire any of the veterans on the market like a Jameis Winston or even an Andy Dalton. He came free. So they are invested fully. Now, there should be some concern there as well, but they know that he is their best chance to win. And if he does come back healthy, even if he's overweight but plays to some semblance of what we know as Ben Roethlisberger, the AFC North could be just a bloodbath this year, considering what Steelers have on defense, the Baltimore Ravens, if the Browns could ever come together with all the talent on that roster. And now you add Joe Burrow to the equation in Cincinnati. That is one exceptional division, and it really is going to depend on that one wing of Ben Roethlisberger and how he's prepared for the season, how difficult the journey is going to be.
Steelers, a team that always is talked about with the playoffs. Well, I'm going to give you two teams that won't be talked about, and tell me if you think there's a third right now that's a leader in the clubhouse for on the clock, because it looks like Jacksonville is making, basically told the Miami Dolphins, hold my beer with tanking for Tua with what they're doing. And I don't know if the Jets roster is good enough to get much more than 3 or 4 wins. Is there another one that you're looking at right now? Who are the teams you're looking at? If we were tanking for Trevor, who do you think are the leaders in the clubhouse right now, based on their roster?
Let me say this. I don't believe that anyone should tank for Trevor. I don't even necessarily believe he's the best quarterback in the nation coming back this year. When you look at Ohio State, Justin Fields, and what he did last year, it is going to be a race to be that top quarterback prospect. And furthermore, if you would have looked back the last 3 years and you would have had Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, and Joe Burrow as your number one quarterback going into their final season on campus, people would have called you crazy. That's just the way.
No doubt.
That's just the way that it's developed in recent years. But with that said, Carolina befuddles me. They really do, because they're primed for a strip it to the studs rebuild, but they haven't gone that route under Matt Rule's new regime. You bring in Teddy Bridgewater, you sign Robbie Anderson, yet you let go numerous veterans who could potentially contribute. Gerald McCoy, Don Terry, Poe, Greg Olson. So that's a team that either they're going to hang into mediocrity or completely fall apart. And I don't know which direction it's going to be, because I just simply don't understand their approach to this year's offseason. So that would be the third team I would throw in there for that group, simply because I want to know what their philosophy is. And it's not apparent at the moment. And the way they've approached the offseason is completely different than what I expected.
All right, you throw in your 2 cents on what the Packers did. A, your thoughts on Jordan Love, and B, is that draft the unmitigated disaster that the two guys you're talking to think it is?
It is, but not for the reason most people think. And I wrote about this past week about going and selecting Jordan Love. This is the sticking point for most people. The actual selection of Jordan Love does not bother me. In fact, in some ways, I think it's a smart way to approach team building. This is the Green Bay Packers, where Ron Wolf basically made them into a powerhouse again in the 90s. He's now in the Hall of Fame. He had a belief that you've invested in a quarterback each and every year, and we saw how beneficial that was for them, even when they had an Iron Man like Brett Favre at the position. Now, with that said, when you look at Jordan Love, everyone looked at him as a potential first-round pick. We knew the ability, we knew the skill, but we also knew he was a developmental prospect. So you place him in a position where he's not going in as the immediate starter. He'll have time to progress and potentially maximize his upside. So to me, that's a positive. The two massive negatives that came from that draft is this. One, you didn't need to trade up for Jordan Love. There was no one positioned that would have made a move for him. Even though they only gave up a 4th-round pick, that's still an asset you could have used elsewhere on your roster. And the other being that for some reason, somehow, one of the most wide receiver needy teams in all of the NFL, which everyone targeted as needing someone to bookend Devontae Adams, didn't select a wide receiver in the most historic wide receiver class ever. And so when you bypass that position altogether, and I don't want to hear from Brian Gutekunst that it didn't fall the way they wanted. You could have manipulated the draft like you did with your quarterback to find the wide receiver you like. Not to mention you continue to pass on receiver after receiver after receiver. To give you an idea, when you look at what they had this year, 36 wide receivers were selected in this year's draft, which tied a common era record. Okay, that 4th-round pick that I mentioned earlier, 18, so half of those wide receivers were selected after the 4th round. You're telling me you couldn't have picked one at some point just to help boost up that positional need, and they just didn't decide to do so? And furthermore, when you did go to offense, you went in the 2nd round with A.J. Dillon, who's a nice player, but he's a downhill physical running back. He's not going to help you much in the passing game. And then number 2, you went for Josiah DeGuara in the 3rd round, who's going to be like the fullback / tight end. How does that help you long term as an offense to not only continue to build around Aaron Rodgers, but Jordan Love eventually? And to me, that's where the biggest mistakes occurred.
No, we back you 100% there, because they had opportunities to help their club later in the draft after Love, and they just seemed to stockpile areas where they were already good. Having a little fun today. because of obviously what's going on. I'm going to ask you our poll question to see where you are going forward. What are you looking forward to doing again? Handshake, bro hug, a good old-fashioned hug, or are you Howie Mandel and you're done with all of it?
No, we're going to go Demolition Man style, where you wave the hands in front of each other. Not from physical contact. What I'm looking forward most to, and I told my wife this the other day, I just want a fresh hot pizza. I mean, that would, because she's one of those. She's one of those where she doesn't even want us ordering fast food or anything like that. So we haven't, and I just wanted a nice hot pie from one of my favorite pizza places here locally, and that would make me greatly happy.
What beer would you have with it? Because you are a self-described beer snob on Twitter. So what is the perfect beer with a pizza?
Well, it depends. See, I'm a stout guy, so I love a deep dark stout, and I do have a deep dark stout. That's actually the name of it, from a local brewery with a buddy of mine called Hightower Brewery. 15% ABV Russian Imperial Stout. I know that's heavy for a lot of people, but that's my nirvana.
Wow, that is heavy.
That is.
That's like a pulling.
You can't do a shot in a beer with that. Holy
damn.
cow.
My goodness, I feel like a cornerback just got run over on the edge. Damn.
I like my beer like my coffee. I want it black as possibly could be.
Right there with you. Right there with you.
Brent, thanks so much. Appreciate your time and your insight, and you and your family stay safe.
Thank you, gentlemen. You guys have a good one.